Hello and welcome. My name is Oscar, and this is Hollywood Underwater. All right, let's get started. On Deadline here, we have a documentary that was picked up recently at the Sundance Film Festival by National Geographic. This is a featured documentary about Australian icon, conservationist, and filmmaker Valerie Taylor. Now, Valerie Taylor, if you don't know, is, as it says here, an icon in the world of underwater filmmaking. Her and her husband, Ron Taylor, from Australia, started shooting underwater film in the 50s. They had been spear fishers and champion spear fishers, and like many people know, in that day they were making that transition based on the fact that the original pioneers, Jacques Cousteau and Hans Haas, Stan Waterman, they were diving right in, forgive the pun, and underwater filmmaking was now recognized as a sort of worldwide hobby or profession. And a lot of people in the 50s started sort of taking this up and trying to get, cameras and underwater housings, however they could. They weren't widely available. So a lot of people were developing their own, designing their own, or even just, using whatever they could come up with, a can, and, sticking a motion picture camera in it and going under. So it really did take off in the 50s. And Ron and Valerie Taylor, they were some of the first to sort of be noticed worldwide for their filmmaking, and got recognized early on. And as you'll see here on IMDb, Valerie Taylor's, and her husband Ron, who passed away in 2012, both had been heavily involved in Hollywood films and documentaries. And as I'll show you here on the filmography on IMDb, I mean, their list goes on and on and on and on. Most famous for Jaws in 1975 here as camera operator live footage. But even before then, way down here in 1971 is Blue Water, White Death. Now, this is the documentary that kind of brought sharks into the spotlight world round, and Ron and Valerie were basically the go-to experts. So it's 1939, and Hans Haas, Austrian, is the first person to dive in the water with untethered. Now this is the important part. People had been filming underwater since 1914. That's another story that we'll get into. But they were doing it tethered or going down into these tubes that would take them underwater into a housing in which they sat. But as far as sticking a camera inside a housing and being untethered and diving in the water, that didn't happen until 1939, which is relatively early in the just in the filmmaking industry in and of itself. Right, it's only 40 years later, basically. Then Jacques Cousteau immediately followed up in 1940, and then of course World War II happens. So that sort of gets put on hold, like everything else in the world at that time, and things didn't pick up again until after 1945. So then that's when these pioneers, Hans Haas and Jacques Cousteau and others like Ron and Valerie Taylor in the 50s, sort of said, hey, this is something that we definitely want to do, and they got themselves a camera and an underwater housing, and they started shooting films. So we'll go to this CNN write-up here where it says that Valerie and her late husband Ron Taylor were among the first to explore the Great Barrier Reef on film. In 1967, the couple partnered with the Belgian scientific expedition and spent 6 months filming its underwater habitats. So like I said, the world of underwater filmmaking was a very small group of people, right? That Jacques Cousteau and his partner Emile Gagnon had just invented the aqua lung, which is basically what you consider today's scuba gear, in which you can breathe regulated air from a tank. And so the world of underwater filmmaking didn't really get started really until all of those pieces came together, which meant really into the 50s. So the fact that in 1967 this Belgian scientific expedition happened, it was still just on the the very early days of underwater filmmaking. And so you already have this small group of people who are filmmakers, underwater filmmakers. And what made them special, these two, this married couple, Ron and Valerie, was that in Australia, it was already known that that great white sharks were often seen in the waters off of Australia, and so they actually started filming sharks, great white sharks, in cages at the time, and so they were basically talk about a small group of people. It was them, this married couple. So in 1969, that's when Hollywood really kind of first came calling. We'll go over here to the Rotten Tomatoes website here. Blue Water White Death documentary. They started filming in 1969. It was released in 1971. As you see here, it's got 100% on the tomato meter and 83% on the audience score, but it's got a nice little write-up explaining what happened here. Several years before Steven Spielberg made a generation of moviegoers afraid to venture into the water, filmmakers Peter Gimbel and James Lipscomb made this ocean-going documentary about their quest to photograph the elusive great white shark. So these were the go-to people for underwater filming of great white sharks. That's what they did. The documentary was released, and it was a big hit, such a big hit that it's known that it is basically what inspired Peter Benchley, who authored the novel Jaws, and further inspired Steven Spielberg to actually make the movie Jaws. And so I go over here to the Dogwolf sales. Dogwolf is one of the producers and distributors of this documentary that was just picked up by National Geographic at Sundance, Playing with Sharks, the Valerie Taylor story. But I want to take you down here where she says here, through her life's arc, we go on a journey of new understandings from fear to respect and admiration of these complex, majestic creatures. And she goes on to say over here in this other report by the Hollywood Reporter, in where she talks about while hand feeding them the coral sea, she discovered that they could learn certain behaviors much like a dog. And that's why I like to show that photograph of her, because in contemporary times now, we've sort of realized that, right? We realize that we've demonized underwater sea creatures because they were unknown, and in myth and tales, like the Kraken and sharks, being these evil, monstrous creatures. And it's taken this long to really sort of get to realize that they are just more of our planet's creatures that need to be taken care of. And she does go on to state, and I believe that's what this film is going to show, in the fact that even Jacques Cousteau and others who did their initial films, it really sort of changed their minds as to how they thought of these underwater sea creatures, especially when you see the brutality that was that they were exposed to. So even like Valerie Taylor, she states that it made a huge difference, and that she spent the rest of her years sort of calling back to Jaws and realizing that while it's a great summer blockbuster, it's my favorite summer blockbuster of all time. I mean, it's a great film, but it definitely did, demonize it. It scared everyone out of the water, and it's taken this long to sort of really backpedal and get back to understanding. And I love that while it was underwater filmmaking that sort of represented and showed this initial brutality, it was also the thing that turned us all as far as, how much respect and love that we need to give these sea creatures. And if we go back to the original story here or not the original, but the piece out of CNN, it does mention down here a global issue. Scientists say around 100 million sharks are killed globally each year, and more than a quarter of the world's shark and ray species are threatened with extinction, targeted for their fins, a delicacy in some Asian countries. So, it's not just an effort by these producers to recognize Valerie Taylor for the icon that she is, and for all of the work that she did, and her conservation efforts and her filmmaking. But it's also a call to, we're in that period in time where we have to pay attention to what we're filming as underwater filmmakers. I, as an underwater filmmaker, want to be able to go down and film sharks aplenty, and any other creatures down there that are in danger of being extinct, of going extinct. So I'm really glad this was picked up, and we don't have any target distribution or presentation dates yet, but I will definitely get that to you when it comes out. All right, thank you for joining me. My name is Oscar, and this is Hollywood Underwater.